This is Senate Appropriations, continuing work on the 24 budget, and we're taking testimony now from the Secretary of State's office, and we have with us our new Secretary of State, Sarah Copeland-Hanses, Lauren Hibbert, who's the Deputy Secretary of State, and then Stacy Big One, who's the Financial Director. Oh goodness, we have a festive
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Oh, luck of the Irish.
Looking good.
Okay, so I know that the Secretary of State has got to leave at 1:30, so why don't you lead off then, Sarah, if you want, with what you'd like to sort of lay out, and then we can get into the, the details of the budget. But this is the Senate, as you know, and we're not probably going to go line by line on your ups and downs, but just sort of the high points and sort of the summary. And then this is a good opportunity to talk about, the office and what you have in mind and the year ahead. So welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Hello, folks who are with us remotely. Secretary of State Sarah Copeland-Hanses, it's really an honor to be here, and it's fun to be on this side of the table instead of sitting in a legislative seat. It's really it's my honor to be here to talk to you a bit about what we are doing going forward in the Secretary of State's office. Before I dive into this, because I don't think we have a lot from the EC in detail here, it was my intention during the campaign, and I'm moving forward with this as a promise to Vermonters, to focus on outreach and civic education.
And might help you expand your efforts on that. You've heard?
No.
Oh, well, we believe that our whole public access system is designed really to support our local government and governance and democracy, and it has no real home. And they cover a lot of the local board meetings, they cover other events, and they really are a way of promoting that kind of civic engagement for people who may not be able to get to the select board meeting or school board meeting or whatever. And so there's been some discussion that as we stabilize that system and figure out how to fund it, it seems like out of all the areas of state government, your effort around municipal and civics education efforts that could be a resource to support that goal.
Well, I appreciate
you all the time.
Thank you, thank you. We love to be sort of the collaborators on a number of different initiatives, and so happy to have that conversation. Transparency in government at all levels is key to people's faith in government, and also key to people's ability to participate in the democratic process of voting when they know who the candidates are, what the issues are, and can better judge from their own knowledge, which candidate has the greatest potential to do what they think is important. And so to that end, we're hiring an education and civic engagement coordinator, hoping that this person will be on board within
She's starting in town.
Okay, so she's starting very soon in the beginning of April. And phase one of that project, as I have envisioned it in the first 2 years, that phase one will be to focus on creating civics curriculum for our school teachers, so that Vermont school teachers have a Vermont-specific, Vermont-relevant, easy-to-use teaching curriculum for civic engagement, and I'd like that to be made available, to the youngest kids as well as right up through high school. then the second part of that project is recognizing that many adults in our communities either never had a good civics understanding or have forgotten what they learned. And we need to get out into our communities and engage with Vermonters about how to do democracy. The end of that 2-year process will, the first 2 years of this project will be focusing on helping us create a voter guide so that when you get your 2024 general election ballot, you will also get a voter guide that has a listing of all of the issues, all of the offices that we will be electing, what those offices do, and then information about the candidates for those offices. Because so many of us find ourselves in communities that no longer have a robust local paper that does candidate profiles. And I know that many of you, like me, have been a candidate and faced with survey after questionnaire after invitation to, to submit something, to paper after organization after advocacy group, and it's nearly impossible for candidates with no staff and no support to simultaneously be working their job and running their campaign and filling out all these surveys. And that's not to say that I'm going to be taking away any of those other surveys, but I would like there to be one-stop shopping for candidates so that you get your ballot, you can see the order that things are on, and you can go onto the website and see the listing of candidates and more easily have that available. So civics focus is very important.
I would just say I love that idea, particularly because a lot of the people that do the surveys have a point of view.
Yes.
And you're approaching it from, I want to get the information out. And that's very much what the local papers used to do, was get the information out. And there's so few of them now. I totally agree.
And the papers that are still doing a candidate listing are expecting you to create it yourself, which is challenging if you're trying to do that across your entire district.
One of the things that's very hard though for candidates and these surveys is that all of a sudden you're supposed to have a comprehensive knowledge of every issue out there.
Yes.
And they're designed for you to take a position oftentimes on issues that you have no. I remember one position on dry cask storage. Well, I was
either yes or no, right? And you have to say.
And most people,
a friend.
and yeah. So it's like, who would know what dry cask storage is unless you were in the, you would. Right. So the one thing that is always a challenge is to respect the legislative process, which is deliberative, and to take testimony and weigh it all out. And how many times people have said, gee, if I had known this information or I understood it this way, I would have taken a very different position. And so the challenge is to get a sense of people's values and experience, but not preempt what is the deliberative process that we engage in here to try to get data, try to get all points of view and come up with something that makes sense. So good luck on that.
I would just say, we might as well, with a lot of the surveys that we take, just mail our votes in and not come here and take testimony. And what you're offering is something that is, I get a feel for the person in the background, and
Yes.
I trust that.
And provide to the voter your website or your contact information or your social media handles, so that if someone is intrigued by the first blush what they read about Senator Westman, they can say, oh great, I'm going to go and check out his website, or I'm going to call him and ask if he has any campaign events near upcoming that I can go to. And in that way, just making it a little easier for people to engage in the democratic process. So that is sort of an initiative of mine that is over and above what we are already doing, which is wonderful work, promoting public trust and enabling good government throughout our agency.
So this gets into another question. We haven't had a lot of candidates aren't complying with the campaign finance.
Mhm.
And to me, that's transparency.
Yes.
And who's where money, larger amounts of money might be coming from. Do you have thoughts on what?
I do have thoughts on increasing transparency around campaign finance. And this legislature, years back when we first developed the campaign finance disclosure system, made some intentional decisions about investigation and enforcement of campaign finance. I am happy to have the conversation. Our office is happy to have the conversation about whether we want to put some enforcement in place. I think my plan, first and foremost, is to do something that doesn't require statutory change,
That might be
which is
who's failing to report.
exactly. So in the next election cycle, we will begin to publish a list of people who are candidates who have not filed. Now, that doesn't mean that they are in violation, because if they haven't raised or spent $500, then they wouldn't necessarily be required to have a profile within the campaign finance system. But a little bit of transparency, because as you probably have heard over the years, there are often times when people are not filing when they really should be. And I think making that easier for folks to understand would go a long way to compelling candidates to get their filing in on time.
Sort of like the old 10 deadbeat dads list. Senator.
Yeah, well, no, I was just gonna say that your office is so responsive. When my treasurer sends a note out, it's instantaneous. And so folks should really understand how receptive you are to helping.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Berger. I was going to say Senator Andy.
Senator Andy.
Not related to your budget, but a quick question on enforcement of elections. This came up in the last election. This is what I heard, is that there was questions about whether candidates were doing things, and they said they called the Secretary of State, and they said the Secretary of State told them to call the Attorney General, and then they called the Attorney General, and the Attorney General told them to call the Secretary of State. I felt like whether your signs have the address and name on it, or other those kind of campaign
Violations, you mean?
Is that true that there's the double finger pointing?
I'm not gonna look backward and say, yes, that happened, or no, that didn't happen. I wasn't.
Well, not that,
part
but
of
is
those
it
conversations.
unclear what they said, that it was unclear on who is supposed to enforce this?
That is probably correct, yes. And there are smaller violations, and then there are bigger violations. If somebody has a week-long set of TV spots, commercial spots, that they're spending money. If they don't have a campaign finance filing, that would be a big violation. Whether a candidate remembered to put their treasurer's name and address on the bottom of their lawn sign could by reasonable people probably be presumed to be a bit of an oversight. But
Some people come back
It
and
is.
put them on. and
Well,
it's
like this,
label.
I still have signs from 2010.
I have older ones than that. And nothing. Oh dear.
So there's more work that we could certainly do together on that, and I'm happy to engage in those conversations as well.
Well,
Don't ding me if I miss a filing by 48 hours.
Yes, I figured that that there should be a reasonable amount of time to make sure that folks have finished that.
Every once in a while we forget.
For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State, the other pieces that we are talking about are reminders. We also are going out to procurement for a new campaign finance system that hopefully will be a little more intuitive and user-friendly. So we're
I just
keeping.
figured out the one you have, though.
but I have to
Me
say,
too, I have my
reminder
favorite.
is so helpful,
Exactly.
particularly in the summer or when some of them come due.
Yeah.
So that would be a great
The
help.
courtesy of a reminder would go a long way
Yeah.
to increasing compliance. Here's the link, it's due in 5 days.
Yeah.
Et cetera.
I just got a notice I need to I'm Secretary of the Danville Chamber of Commerce, and we are
Not
corporate, so I have to file, and I got a reminder, and
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't remember.
The businesses get reminders and licensees get reminders.
Uh-huh.
But I think right now candidates do not, lobbyists get reminders.
Oh,
So we should remind candidates
Yeah.
as well and,
Well, when it's out of the campaign season and you come due, I space out and then go, oh crap.
yes.
You're in good company, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So let me tell you a little bit more about the different divisions of the Secretary of State's office. Vermont State Archives and Records Administration, if you haven't already been to our Middlesex facility, we would love to have you come and take a tour. This is the agency, the part of our agency that is focused on protecting, preserving, providing, and promoting public records. And so we work very closely with all agencies of state government. The warehouse is immense, and the number of boxes of actual physical paper documents is vast, and increasingly the records that we're bringing in are electronic records, and so significant focus on data storage and the ability to retrieve records in an easier way to make them available to Vermonters. Our elections division, which perhaps is the most high profile because it touches on everything that you do. But we are really focused on preserving the integrity of elections, making sure that voters know how to be registered and how to cast their ballot, and making sure that our elections are safe, secure, and accessible. We have a bit of a joke that we pass back and forth among the office that a secondary goal here is to make elections boring again, because there has been so much focus on the misinformation about voter fraud, and we would like to double down on transparency for Vermonters to understand how their elections work, and make it as boring as it should be, because we have very well run elections here in Vermont thanks to our tremendous town clerks. Our corporations division, providing the business community and the public with easy access to information about business registration and doing business in Vermont. And this is the workhorse of our agency, and we.
I thought you were going to say OPR.
Well, that is as well. We're going to get there.
When you talk about workforce, I mean, that's.
Yes. Yeah. The corporations division, is one that is also looking at an IT upgrade along with our elections division. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get deeper into the budget. Our Office of Professional Regulation, always doing good work for Vermonters, protecting the public, but also being a resource for licensees by streamlined regulation, focusing that regulation on the right size regulation to prevent unethical or unprofessional practitioners, but also being accessible to our licensees so that they can more quickly get through that process and get to work. And then our municipal and civics education, we provide support and a friendly voice on the phone to help the municipal officials figure out how to operate within the realm of public records and open meeting law, but also in assistance in all municipal related activities. And do you want me to do this one? You want to do this?
I'll do this one.
Okay. You go
We've
ahead.
been close to
I've been
one.
talking for a while, yes. That's all.
I just want to make sure you don't miss your call, whatever.
Vote. Maybe I'll take this transition moment to say, if you have any other questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I don't know folks who are remote, but otherwise I could let Stacy come and sit here.
That would be fun.
And you could walk through more of the details. And we do so appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
don't hesitate to come down for a visit, please.
I mean, obviously, we've got, this committee is doesn't consist of new legislators, so I think
You may not need all of the
you don't
details
need
of how the.
well, I think about the House committee and new members, the new members to the legislature that are on that committee. So I consider myself fortunate to have a lot of experience around the table. So, so we don't need to get into exhaustive detail about the
Sure.
individual divisions.
So if I could just do high level what's coming up next
Yeah, that would be
for the
great.
next year for each division, and maybe that will help with the budget conversation. And if you have any questions about a specific
Don't
division,
forget to phone.
this issue that she's about has to go weigh in on is, I mean, talk about protecting our democracy. It's very interesting. It's voter records across state lines. So the Vermont State Records and Archives Administration, we're almost fully staffed in this division. I think the budget pressures really are continuing to get this agency, this division of the agency fully staffed. We do have some very low budget IT needs here with databases and repositories that don't really have an impact on the budget per se in the way that the other IT projects have, but just worth mentioning that we're always trying to, in this division, be ready for the next type of records that are coming in and delivering those records as seamlessly as possible to the Vermonter or to the state agency who is relying on us to store them. Elections and campaign finance and lobbying, I would say, as Secretary Copeland stated, we do have 3 RFPs currently pending. One we've received the bids on, the other 2, the bidder responses are not due yet. But the budget pressures here really are those IT spends and elections. And I think there is a whole slide about this later. Elections does have federal grant fund through HAVA, and we can get into that we can use some of our HAVA money for those IT spends. HAVA is Help America Vote Act.
It's been around a long time. I mean, like the tabulators and to help use Bravo.
And the HAVA money is coming to an end, and there is, I think it's passed the House and is now sitting with the Senate on the federal level to pass HAVA again. It was in Biden's budget address. So in the elections community, people are really hoping and counting on that money, and there is a small state minimum within that money, so we obviously benefit from that. But as you stated, Madam Chair, it really has helped us do some critical infrastructure with tabulators. And Vermont is a mix. We still have hand count towns, about 100 hand count towns, because you need 1,000 in the law. You need 1,000 people to require a tabulator. But you know, as we think through voter reforms, as you think through the ranked choice voting bill that I think probably is coming to you, that will require expense because we can't do ranked choice voting through hand count.
No, I was going to say.
That would be impossible. So
You could if there was like 25 voters.
Right, so in a victory.
Yeah.
Or to say everyone.
Grammy.
No.
Or Buell's Core.
Eden, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Well, Eden's
not
bigger.
Eden,
Eden's
Eden's bigger. Belvedere is the smallest town I've got. Belvedere's got quite a bit less than 200 voters in the whole town. And Belvedere is the last town that reports to me every single day. The last.
How big is St. George? They're also.
So, well, we'll keep going here.
Yeah. The Office of Professional Regulation, you probably have heard, we are in a bit of a budget crisis in that division. And I'll get into it a little later. That is a special fund, meaning we have 2 funds of the Secretary of State. The Office of Professional Regulation is on its own through only licensing fees. The remainder of the divisions and administration is through the SOS fund, which is funded primarily by, almost exclusively by corporations fees. So the OPR fund is in a bit of a crisis.
And I know the House is working on that.
The House is working on it.
Because some of the compacts, for example, have resulted in a reduction in revenues. And the cost, I mean, the fees are supposed to cover the cost of regulation. And so without some increases,
Yeah.
you're running deficits.
We are,
Yes.
So, finish we are.
We are talking about it. There is a fee bill currently being discussed in Ways and Means. You know, and just specifically to compacts, you know, the nurse licensure compact, we are just completing our first renewal of the registered nurses in the nurse licensure compact. We are expecting about a third of a loss of our licensee base, but our costs have not gone down. So it is causing a bit of a crisis. And the way that I have been talking about it in the House committees is really the public good of the compact and whether or not it's fair to transfer the public good of the compact onto our in-state licensees through raising fees. And it's really, you know, it's something that when the Office of Professional Regulation was contemplated, we never anticipated that we'd have a third of our licensee population who didn't work, live, and sleep in Vermont. And that's what we have now. And that's what we're going to continue to have. And the compact, because of visiting nurses, because of telehealth, because the way that we deliver all professional services has really changed. And I think will continue to change and something we need to fix.
So along the lines of the compact, obviously, we just finished a very important bill on legally protected healthcare, and the compact study is a part of that. I think Lauren Lehman came in to testify. And so this isn't an appropriations issue necessarily, but it will be helpful to know that folks who are coming from out of state and delivering legally protected health care in this state are protected from any long arm from their state or and I don't, so we just have that little piece in there.
Yeah.
Just ahead, you probably know this already.
I did know, and I look forward to really looking into the issue. We really have been working with the compact administrations to try and figure out how to protect our licensees from reciprocal discipline and the long arm problem that you're discussing. You know, just like we couldn't have anticipated compacts when the Office of Professional Regulation was created, even when we joined the physician compact and the nurse licensure compact, we did not anticipate the fall of Dobbs and the ripple effects for legally protected healthcare, which I'm glad that you've defined and created. I would have said are very important even before you did that. But
and I'm glad to chat with you from that perspective. But as we heard from the folks from Colorado who direct the compact, I don't think there was any empathy about that.
No, I think.
Are you okay? Do you want some water?
Is it possible for me to get some water? Excuse me.
Oh, do you have a cup?
Glasses right here.
Just hand me a cup and I'll get it.
Thank you. I apologize. I don't know what happened to me. It was the hot questions.
Definitely a hot question.
So let me just go a little faster. Corporations and business registration, again, here, that is where we are planning and IT spend. And importantly for this committee, you know, in fiscal year 2022, we collected $8.24 million in revenue.
Oh, Bobby, you have a question, sorry.
Well, maybe I'm late, but I had a question in regards to the compacts and the 1/3 number that was mentioned. I don't know if I heard it clearly, but my issue, and I supported the interstate compacts deal when it was passed, thinking that we would pick up more nurses coming to Vermont than you know, enough so that we could fill our needs. But the way it's turned out, I see nurses with coming into Vermont that belong to the compacts that are driving up the nursing cost dramatically because they've signed up with visiting nurse organizations, and then we have to raise the price to our nurses to compete with these out-of-staters. And I'm wondering if there was any kind of a measure of that, and who's participating and not participating in that compact that's costing our visiting nurses and hospice organizations and every hospital a tremendous amount of extra money.
We're talking about
You're talking about
travelers.
So, Senator Starr, thank you. I'm certainly not the biggest expert on this topic, but in terms of who's utilizing the compact and how, we are submitting a report next January on this topic. That was part of the request of the passing legislation of the compact. And, you know, it's very hard to parse out. Of course, people have asked me this question, and it's very hard to parse out the effect of COVID versus the compact, I would say, on the healthcare community in Vermont. We certainly had a large proportion of travelers before the compact was enacted and before COVID happened. I would submit that our reliance on travelers has increased, but I don't know whether that's because of the compact. Certainly the compact is making it easier to bring people into the state and reducing the timelines. And I've heard directly from the healthcare institutions that was a lifesaver during COVID. But I don't think that the compact is meaning that there's more travelers. I think we just don't have enough nurses in our state. We're not growing enough nurses in our state. We don't have the big nursing institutions that some other states have. And I always like to just put a plug in for nursing programs, and any person that I ever meet who's thinking about what should I do, I always say, think about nursing. Because
Actually, this committee understands that, and that's why we've been putting to grow the number of students that the programs can accommodate,
Right.
because there are more eligible students and qualified students than there are slots, and then of course, so this
they're
gets
turning around, they're turning away applicants.
right. But if you've been around a long time ago, years and years ago, all our local hospitals had RN training programs,
Yeah.
and they actually developed their own workforce. And those programs over time have all been shut down and all shifted to the academic model, and it really has constrained the supply, and we're experiencing that that shift in education and site and closure of the programs in terms of the nurses that we would educate, and many of them, of course, lived locally, and it was accessible and affordable, and so we're well aware of the need to grow that capacity, because all we're doing, as I've said, it's sort of chum in the water for an inadequate supply. And until we deal with the supply and generating more trained nurses, we're going to be in this shortage environment, and it's a real problem. And the cost is really enormous. So, well, does that answer your question, Bobby? We'll keep going.
Well, yeah, sort of. We've talked about this in the committee for a couple of years now, and we put a lot of money into promoting scholarships and things to help grow it. But maybe it's a structural issue that we're going to have to work on more at our universities or at our local hospitals to try to get
We're
that.
seeing some of those partnerships develop, and for that very reason. So it's
Yeah, thank you.
but everything takes time, same as housing. So
I'm gonna go very quickly through page 5. I'm not gonna touch any more on municipal and civics education unless you have questions. Safe at Home, a really important program that doesn't have a huge budgetary impact, but has a huge impact for our participants' lives. That's a address confidentiality program. And we are very proud, we're gonna be hosting, Vermont is hosting the conference this year in Burlington.
That's awesome.
And temporary officiant, we do collect fees through this, somebody who can officiate at a specific wedding in Vermont.
Oh, my goodness, over 200,000.
Well, a little marriage is going on.
Well,
Right.
COVID delayed a lot of love.
So we're in business.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh-huh.
So going back to previous in the testimony, we do have those two special funds. 2198 to 2192.8 is our service fund. It's composed primarily of corporations fees. And typically the excess is swept into the general fund. This year, we are projecting a very low sweep, if any at all, and we anticipate doing the same next year. We have, as discussed, those IT projects that we need to not go into a deficit for, and we have historically not asked for an IT spend for those projects, instead using our own fees. So you will see that in the documents ahead. And we have had increased pressures. The salary and benefits contractual contract increases have impacted all of our office, and then those IT spends. For the OPR fund, again, that is special fund. It can't be used outside of professional licensing, and it's even more complicated than that. Boards funds can't be used to support another board's funds. It pays for all of our full-time employees at the Office of Professional Regulation and 48% of executive
cost
and admin. We are looking at the admin. We have, last year we received 3 positions from the legislature that we actually have not filled because of our budget pressures. We are talking with Buildings and Grounds to try and reduce our annual lease rate. We have a very expensive lease through them. And we also have been starting to curtail some of our IT costs. We do have a very successful IT build, but it is more expensive than we have been projecting. It has enabled us to do Herculean things during COVID, and it has allowed us to really grow. You know, in 2017, I think we had under 60,000 licensees. Now we have over 85,000 licensees, but without a large addition of staff.
I do have a question around IT, and I'm wondering if you, rather that I ask it here or save it until a later moment when you're talking about IT requests.
I'm happy to answer it now.
Okay, so going back to the last election, there was, you know, and I'm thinking primarily of the Senate race, there was an inability to get results, which I've never seen with, you know,
We have never seen the diagram.
yeah, and I understand that there was ongoing work being done in part around the districts as they've been newly constructed following redistricting. Has that work been completed?
So we are in a fortunate moment in that the understanding of the districts is obviously fully completed at this point. But we are going out to bid. We're in the competitive bidding process for a brand new election system.
Okay.
And it was a horrible confluence of events of the redistricting plus an aging system.
Yeah.
And the inability to make those changes in an effective way, which caused the issue.
And so you're going out to bid now. What does that mean for the timeline on elections?
Will it happen again? Is the next, will it be taken care of by next election? Is that what you're?
How much wood can I knock on? Like, this is solid wood, that's solid wood. We are really.
Senator Bruce and.
I did not say
This is
that.
my daughter's go-to thing. She always knocks on my head.
So it is our intention to be in the new system for the 2024 presidential primary. So, and if not, we are going to extend our we are in the process of extending our contract for that through that election.
Well, just as
What's the date,
redundancy.
what's the date of our primary then?
It will be town meeting day,
Oh, that's right, March. Yeah.
March 2024.
But, no. So,
Are you thinking of running for president?
no.
Other than
I'm trying to think of
president of the Senate?
I'm trying to think of when, so this is a different question, but this problem started quite a bit before the last election. There was knowledge of it quite a bit before. So then we're talking about.
We were concerned about it in the primary.
Yeah.
And I was part of those discussions then. So I think, yes, you know, the presidential primary in March 2024.
I'm just saying it's been quite a long hiatus for that not to be, because we were told it was going to be done before the election. Then we were told it was going to be done immediately after the election. Now I hear you saying it won't be done for 2 more years.
Well, so the settling of the districts and the work to prep for the new system is complete.
Right.
But the question is, we don't intend to run those elections in our current system. So it does not make sense to continue to spend money on the old system fix, because we are not intending to use the old system for the 2024 elections. And so we are moving forward with the new system and trust and hope and knock on everything that we will be in that new system for all 3 2024 elections. So that's presidential primary, state primary, and then general election.
Fair enough.
Good luck.
And please ask me about it again. Because I think, you know, it is top of the mind for our team, for our elections team, but it's really important for us to remember the high stakes for Vermonters, for candidates. And it's top of the mind. So in the OPR fund, the estimated fiscal year budget is $8 million, and with about $1 million increase, and that budget is running at about a $2 million deficit.
That's why those fees are so important.
So the HAVA grant, I'm not gonna go into detail. You can read that, but if you have any questions about how we can use it or how we have used it, we really used it previously for tabulators and for the ability to transition to universal vote by mail for the 2020 general election. We are planning to use it for this IT spend. We have a security grant, and we've met our match. And then we have this very small grant for national historical publications and records. This is important. We have a roving archivist who is able to use her time towards this grant and to just build the importance and knowledge around historical records. We did receive COVID funding, $750,000 to offset the IT costs that OPR related to the implementation of telehealth, which is going very well. We are anticipating a very successful launch of telehealth on July 1st, and we're on track. The rulemaking is still in process, but we're planning to go live. And then $250,000 to offset anticipated expenditures for the new appropriation system. And now we get into the spreadsheets. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, or to turn to Stacy, because she knows the spreadsheets even better than I do.
Well, page 11 then is the summary for your budget, and that's what we work from. I realize that we've got more detail here, but I think let's run through this. In some ways, you've touched on it. For example, the corporation systems upgrade, special funds in 1.5, so we can sort of look at the high points here relative to what you've been talking about. But You know, you've got one here per diem, 34,000. We probably won't spend a few hours on that.
I can tell you how many times the Board of Psychological Examiners met. No, that's what that is, the per diems for our boards.
We understand.
Yeah.
And we'll let the House take care of that.
Okay. I look forward to discussing it with them.
Oh, they're working on their budget as we speak. So, in terms of general fund, committee, just take a look at that left-hand column. There is none. You can see it's special funds and then federal funds. So this is one of those budgets that are somewhat unique. DFR is another that we have. But I think what you're telling us with the expenditures, the amount of money that's going to be available to be swept into the general fund is going to be fairly modest at best. Senator Lynch.
So I know that DFR has bill back authority in certain conditions. Do you have any bill back authority whatsoever for any of the systems management changes coming through for corporations? Is there any thought about that as a possibility?
Included in the fees, probably.
Is it realistic?
It's all fee-based. There
It's all
won't be
fee-based.
anything for us to bill back.
So that's a mechanism that you use in order to generate the revenues to support your work.
Yes.
And that's why the fee increase is so important to you.
Correct.
And
Well,
I'll just say that the fee increase that we have is for the Office of Professional Regulation and corporations, very modest fee increases in corporations, but the majority of corporations' fees have not been touched. It's at least 2015. And so even with inflation, the cost is not kept up to scale at all. And we have been looking at the median of our sister states to try and ground what's reasonable. But in the majority of the instances for our corporations fees, we were significantly lower than New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, New York, and Connecticut. And so we want to build
So
a
you're
little bit
not,
more of a
the
budget.
House is really taking a look at some of your
Yes.
fees, but not those fees.
They are looking at those fees too. They're looking at the Office of Professional Regulations fees and corporations.
That's good to hear. And I think what will happen is those fees will be incorporated in one of your contracts. So, all right, well, that's encouraging because, and it's also when you're talking about comparability to other states and we're, significantly more. It means that there's room for adjustment and not put us into it. It would be very different if we were already very high relative to our neighbors. But it sounds like because we haven't done anything for quite a long time, the fees are relatively modest compared to the cost. What else should we look at here?
I think the important things here are that we are trying to reduce our OPR IT contract spending, you'll see that, and the increase in our election system upgrade and corporations upgrade. That is significant. That cost will be, 1.5 for the corporation system and 2.3 for the election system. Those will be spread out over the course of several years. So that is just our first year spend, just to keep that in mind. And then we are really trying to, as I said, just trying to make good fiscal decisions on smaller items that ultimately compound to make bigger budget impact. So furniture spending, space spending, staff spending, those aren't our big ticket items. Staff are our biggest expense across every division. IT is second, space is third. But we're trying to make little decisions where we can to cut off on the margins because we are conscious that our budget pressures are high.
So the federal HAVA then for your election system upgrade is your funding source for that?
Yes. Yes, and hopefully the new funds will be authorized. That bill will pass again and those new funds will be authorized and we will be able to request those funds again.
Great. Questions from the committee right now? and hopefully we can see some of those fees adjusted to help deal with some of the fiscal issues that we talked about.
Yeah, great time.
Thank you.
Please send any questions my way if you have any follow-up.
Well, we have the budget divvied up according to, and I'm not sure who has secretary.
Or-
Oh, Bobby has Secretary of State, well. and-
I thought it was me, so I looked it up.
Well, Senator Starr, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, very good. Looks pretty straightforward, but if we have questions, I'll call.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Judy, now we have the
Thank you,
state
Jamie.
auditor. Are we gonna have the deputy
I
auditor?
believe it is the deputy auditor.
And is he
We
gonna?
got a deputy dog
Zoom
coming in.
joining right now.
I think we should swear him to oath.
Yes.
Put him
Thank
under
you
oath.
very much.
Thanks. See you guys.
Bye. The deputy auditor is presenting the budget. Where is that?
I hope not.
He's a minute out. He's a minute out.
Bobby, is it true? I heard a rumor that you now called him deputy dog.
Yeah, we'll call him deputy dog.
That used to be, well,
No,
No, we actually
We
have
haven't
the
got
auditor
We have the
himself.
real
we
audit.
got the full, whoa.
Sheriff dog.
There was a rumor that your deputy was going to be put into action.
Well, he may be lingering
Oh.
here.
He's always lurking,
Malinger.
lurking. You know, it was nice though of the deputy secretary of state to show up.
But not so nice of it.
In person.
In
Well, my
person.
deputy did tell me,
Have him in person.
So, Doug, it's good to have you with us, and we will go through your ups and downs, and I guess also give you the opportunity to talk a bit about the office and, how things are going, and an opportunity for you to tell us what you think we should know about your office priorities and the work ahead. I'd say we've got your performance report, and then of course we have the ups and downs part. So why don't you take it from here? Was Tim Ash going to join you? Or are you presenting? Do you have other people with you, Doug? All I can see is you on the screen.
no, it's just me. As you can see from the materials, we have frankly very little to talk about. Although Tim did tell me of your interest in detail. If you'd like to talk about our office supply budget, we can get right into that.
Yeah, I thought, I really like to spend a lot of time on, the $851, that really intrigues me. I want to know what the $1 is for, Doug.
That's for a new stapler for me. The bottom line is, as you can
Gonna be
see,
a small one.
yes. The bottom line is that our budget request is a very modest increase, and virtually all of it is driven by factors over which we have no control, which is basically payroll, benefits, and our contract with CLA, which, as you know, does the annual financial and compliance audits. And it appears in part because of COVID, we're going to have a couple of extra programs that need to be audited for the single audit. Otherwise, there's virtually no change. Although I will add, just for the record, I did request a modest increase for my deputy.
Well, that's denied.
Out of hand.
We'll give it our serious consideration. A couple of years ago, you changed the entity doing the single state audit, and I'm just wondering, has that how experienced to date? I know it actually was a way, you saved a considerable amount of money and put some fresh eyes, and just was wondering where that stood from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It was not an easy decision. I like the folks from KPMG. It was really a tough call, but I did want some fresh blood, and I know it was devastating for KPMG, but I'm certain now it was the right decision, not just to save a couple of bucks, just to get a new crew in. And even though they had to learn the ropes because they had not been in Vermont state government, they do a number of other states. So they're really quite experienced and capable. And we've been very happy with them. The challenge, for the most part, not on the now called ACFR, used to be CAFR. The single audit has suffered during COVID, as is the case in many other states, for the most part because of personnel. Not only are there gaps and vacancies throughout state government and in the private sector, but there's been, I didn't know this until a conversation with them the other day, there's been a fair amount of movement within and among departments. So as people retired or chose not to continue for whatever reasons, people in Department X said, oh, I've always wanted to work in Department T, and I'm taking the opportunity and moving over there. So there was a lot of loss in institutional knowledge and experience. And I think the guys have told us that they believe the state would benefit from a little more succession planning within departments, particularly for the folks who handle this kind of information. And that's not easy or cheap, but if you do it right, it pays off. So thank you for the question. I'm very happy with the decision we made.
Anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well,
I know you have, thoughts around some of the metrics in terms of outcomes, and I did read that report as well, and it kind of raised the question about its utility, and we have that, the extent to which that chief performance audit officer work informs the executive branch or the legislative branch. Did you get any feedback from the executive branch on that?
Not really, but we have heard from legislative members of that committee that they are now talking about eliminating that committee. That wasn't our intent going in. And it's fair to say that of course, is one report on performance measurement. It's conducted by the executive branch, the administration. As you know, more than most other committees, all of the departments and agencies do some amount of performance measurement internally. And what the administration does, I didn't find it terribly helpful. And I know a bit about this, having worked on it for years, but we didn't mean to say, nor did we say that there isn't good information within state government. There could be a lot more and better information, but it's just that process wasn't terribly helpful. And if it disappears, I don't think anybody will miss it, to be very honest. Having said that, I would hope that you guys and your colleagues over on the House side would ask people, as I know you do, as best you can as time permits, about their performance. That's the time to do it. And also, I think in the committees of jurisdiction, to the extent possible.
Well, I agree with you. And, to have an overlay that's based on experience, having a special committee just didn't seem to work. And from my perspective, that really is it should be inherent in every dollar we spend and for every policy, and whether it's the money committees or the, and we kind of moved away from policy because in fact, your budget committees are dealing with policy all the time and setting priorities and so forth. But the subject matter committees really maybe historically have kind of been advocates for the programs that fall in their the committee jurisdiction. But really inherent in looking at programs is the need to say, how are they working? Are they getting the results? Are they in fact in need of overhaul? And are we getting the outcomes that we like? So to me, it should just be part of how we do our work and how we think. And overlaying a committee is unnecessary at best, if in fact that's how your committees are thinking and looking at issues. So Senator Sears seems to have a big yellow hand up.
I do have a big yellow hand up. I want to be careful how I say this because it's not meant to be derogatory to anyone. But one of my frustrations over the years has been our ability to hold the administration and in some cases the judiciary accountable as legislators and as chair of the Judiciary Committee. And it's simply, number one, we don't have the staff. to do that. And number two, we don't have the time, quite frankly, to spend. You know, I'll get 100 bills in my committee, and at best I can do, 10 of them to 12 of them a year, in a biennium that are Senate bills. It's bothered me very much, and I think where I've made a mistake, and where in some cases the auditor hasn't been as forceful as he should, is we should be looking at his reports as committee members as kind of that function. And so, Doug, it would be important that we work together and meet routinely to talk about. I mean, the sheriff's things got really out of control, but we did have inklings way back when. If we had looked at some of your reports, and some of your reports have been able to be more thorough as well. I'm not taking all the blame, but I also think other things that you've come up with, I read about them in Vermont Digger, or you send me a copy, but it's like any other report. It gets the attention that sometimes it goes on to 5 or 6 different things. And I don't mean to offend you or anyone else with that. I think actually your reports are often very helpful. But sometimes I don't think we pay enough attention to them.
Well, that's why we gave Joint Fiscal Committee the responsibility of reviewing audit findings that were repetitive, because there was cost associated. It was a way of making sure we gave it that attention. But you're absolutely right. This morning we spent over an hour going over. You had done an audit of the state's paving program, and so our transportation committee spent about an hour going through your findings and your recommendations. But it was also a good validation that, to a very large extent, many of the processes were solid. The liquid damages were handled properly, and so it's both. It was a very good kind of review of that part of the transportation budget.
Well, for what it's worth, after all these years, I do have a sense of how much comes across your desks. I would be the first to stand with you if you asked or chose to engage in the conversation about the need for more staff. I think, frankly, it's outrageous that you guys don't have the staff you need. You end up relying on information from the administration, which is fine. That's their job to that extent. But you guys need independent information, and not just from performance audits, but developed by your own staff. I could see doubling the size of Ledge Council and JFO. It's a very sensitive subject. I'm not sure how many people would understand that it's righteous, but I will speak out if anyone ever asks me about the potential value of that. I know what it would mean for you. As for how long you meet, that's a much more complicated issue. But for the time you're here, I think you could do a lot more work with a lot more support.
Well, I guess that's nice to hear. Thank you. I don't see that there's a great deal of value on our citizens' legislature and our willingness to serve. But every year, more and more hours are extracted or expected. So it gets harder.
Well, for example, as you know, I've had an interest in economic development for many years, predating my time in this job. And they deal with, as all the committees do, significant amounts of money. And they don't have access to JFO the way you guys and your colleagues on the other money committees do. And I think a few more staffers at JFO to help with fiscal notes on some of those programs, so that you don't have to rely primarily on, self-interested self-attestations by the administration and endless numbers of lobbyists. Forgive me, but that's primarily what the committees hear. And that's not balanced at all. In any case.
We're trying to actually, Joint Fiscal is doing more of those fiscal notes in a broader way. But as somebody who sat in this chair many years ago said, there's an awful lot of social calculus that goes on. And, you make decisions and you'll get a 3-to-1 return or 11-to-1. We had somebody come in and say it was 21-to-1. And I thought, gee, we should give the budget and then we'd be rolling in dough. But we're not necessarily are in a good position. We can't do it, but that is, how do we make sure that when we make these investments with the best of intentions, that in fact, we're getting the outcomes that we wanted? And sometimes the evaluators sometimes can have a bias as well, because they're basically looking at, some of their own policy priorities.
Exactly. As to your question about what else, I can just tell you in brief, the kind of work that we're doing right now and what's expected in the near term. We are going to release next week a very short report on broadband. I've been interested, as is everyone, in how that effort was proceeding. It was too young and not sufficiently mature to really spend the time until very recently. The report will basically be discussing risks going forward, which is, I thought, might be helpful to you guys, although I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of new information, but at least you'll get it from us. Second, the following week, we expect to release a report that's very important to me. I just lost my father, who was 99, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that so many Vermonters and others around the country are in nursing homes, assisted care facilities, and so forth. And I thought it was an appropriate question to ask the extent to which Dale was looking after their interests. We know they do a good job with nursing homes because of the federal connection and the risk of not doing that, but that doesn't exist with assisted living and residential care homes. So that should be about a week and a half from now. It's a good report. I think it's important. We are engaged also in an audit of ADS and their project management results for about a half a dozen programs, including one from the Secretary of State's office, by the way. Also, we have recently begun an audit of the Public Utility Commission. They have a very limited number of performance measures. And as Senator Sears alluded to, the judiciary, it's not even as robust as the judiciary, which in my view sometimes isn't quite as crisp as they could be. We also are conducting yet another TIF audit, as we are required to do, this time South Burlington for the first time. And we are looking into something that I knew nothing about until it was brought to my attention. And you guys will remember this, no doubt. But back in 2016, you authorized the creation of this new occupational title called dental therapist.
Oh, yeah, so the program isn't off the ground.
No, exactly. And they've spent apparently about $1.6 million, but there's no program. So we'll wait and see what happens. We've just begun collecting information. It's very early, and maybe there's certainly good explanations. I don't know.
Well, we did have a meeting at VTC this summer saying, why isn't this program? And of course, the new president assured us that this would be a priority and that he would deliver it. And there were some federal grants. I'm not sure exactly what the expenditures are for, but it was a long time ago that program was authorized, getting it set up. And once again, I think they went through a number of staff people, in charge, and it's been an area of frustration, no question about it, Doug. So.
Well, we'll get back to you on that. I don't think it's going to take that long because there's not that much to hold on to.
No, I don't think it would. But
just a heads up for you for next year. As you may know, you may not, on occasion, it's not uncommon in our TIF audits to seek an opinion from the Attorney General's office if there's ambiguity in statute. Generally, if it appears straightforward, we comment on it and use it. If we are unclear, excuse me, auditors cannot substitute their opinion for attorneys. So we turn to the AG, and Bill Griffin was very helpful over time and so forth. But both the former Attorney General and the current Attorney General have indicated they don't want to do that anymore. Although it's curious to me because it's very clear in statute that they are required to do that for us. So I don't know what to make of it, but it's possible on occasion we may have to hire an attorney. So we'll wait and see. Excuse my coughing.
oh, well, Sandra, you have a question, Andy?
Yeah, Doug, I have a question. I liked your performance report. I didn't know you did such a thing. Kind of like some of the reports. Like I didn't know about the paving report that was on the agenda and transportation today. But it was great. It's kind of like you're doing an audit of the auditor office. office. But well, I didn't understand how to read the recommendation implementations. Is it page 4 and 5? That so like you have that target for the 3 years. So you have these, like on the 2019, you have 4 audits you did. Then you had the 75% target. But I didn't really understand. Those are like within the 3 years after the audit, or can you just explain those tables?
Yeah, we go back a year out initially and determine the extent to which the auditee has adopted our recommendations. And we don't take their word for it. We need documentation. So we go 1 year out and 3 years out.
Okay, so it's like for the 19 reports, these numbers are 3 years out.
Correct.
Okay.
They were reported when they were 1 year out a couple of years ago.
Other questions?
I guess I have another comment on the Government Accountability Committee, which I'm on, and also I have recommended that we get rid of it because I don't think it's a useful in its current, and it's not even doing what the statute says the committee is supposed to do. It doesn't do. And what it does do, I think it's similar to your comments on the statewide report, because that's basically all they're doing is working with this state performance report, helping what the questions are. But it might be interesting for the legislature to work with the auditor's office on what a government accountability committee could do, like what you see, and maybe it's helping other committees know about what the auditor's reports are coming out that might be pertinent to a committee. But I'd be interested in a conversation with the auditor on how you could have the legislature see the legislature doing a better job of that kind of auditor role.
Maybe do you have any role in the orientation of new legislators, Doug?
I've never been invited, no.
No, it seems to me understanding the role and the importance of the auditor's office and how that work can help really help the legislature carry out its responsibility would be helpful, because I think many legislators just don't have the knowledge. So maybe that's something we should talk to Joint Fiscal that oversees the new member orientation to make sure that everyone's getting an overview of the various parts of state government.
I would be happy to do that. Thank you very much. And back to your question, Senator Perslick, you could make a good case that my office could or should do at least one audit of a major agency's performance measurement reporting every year. As I said before, some do very robust and useful collections and reporting on performance, others much less so. But I think it would be useful because nobody else is doing it. We're the only ones who are independent.
Do you think a legislative committee could do that, or would it need to be from the auditors?
It's a little time consuming and you have to be into the data.
A program audit can't be.
You could certainly report. I would imagine it could go to GovOps, but it would be better if it were a joint thing with the Committee of Jurisdiction as well as GovOps and you guys as well.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if we didn't have to do TIF, God only knows what we could do.
We'll think of something. Don't worry. Senator Starr, you seem to be waving.
Yeah. I was just wondering, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the broadband. You said you've got a report coming out. I certainly hope that you keep a close eye on where all that money's going and that we're actually getting some mileage, because in years past, we spent millions of dollars and didn't seem to go very far. So I hope you guys your office is really onto that and keeping track of those millions.
Well, this report, as I mentioned, is the first of what could be a couple in series, because it's a moving target. And the CUDs are now up and running. They're much better staffed and have the professional support they didn't have a year ago. The same for the board, which allocated a lot of money before they really were staffed up also. So, and there's a number of outstanding issues that you'll see in the report that I think will, you guys undoubtedly will discuss and address. It's a big deal. You only get one shot to spend this kind of money. So,
well, up until the ARPA and CRF money, we really didn't. We had this goal, but 5 million here and 5 million there, I said is inconsequential. You're not going to see and no one was honest in saying what it would take to fund a full rollout, and it was 500 million to $1 billion. And so we had politicians saying we're going to get to universal this and that, but the funding wouldn't even get internet to the local doghouse, to put it bluntly. So we had expectations that were far exceeded, and what we had for funding. But with the federal dollars, this is our critical opportunity. So I think your report can be very helpful there.
I hope so. And there is some uncertainty about some of the money coming, as you probably know.
Yeah.
We're expecting a lot more. It may be less than has been discussed, and it may be delayed in some instances.
Yeah, I was thinking about 125 million more, and then maybe more through IIJA. So we're hopeful because that'll be a critical piece to expand services.
Just one other thought in response to Senator Sears' comment before, with regard to accountability. I mentioned this not to pick on them, but because they come up every year in the context primarily of the single audit, but also the financial audit, as having a lot of problems, and certainly, in fairness, exacerbated by COVID. But the Department of Labor doesn't seem to be held to account for a series of very serious problems year after year after year. And it was curious, and my deputy, your former colleague, wasn't even aware of this. Not that he missed it, but he had never thought about it. They are not part of the agency of administration. They're not part of any agency. They're just a bizarre little, not little, an entity, sort of an autonomous republic sitting out there. And having said that, I'm not sure that being part of an agency would make a difference, but it would provide another layer of accountability, because right now they answer technically only to the governor. And the governor's a busy guy. So we were just talking with the CLA auditors about this, and it seemed to me that it might be something worth considering. And I think Tim said, well, what about putting them in the agency of administration? I said, they have a public-facing responsibility in workers' comp and UI and so forth. So having those constituencies and serving so many Vermonters, I think they'd be a better fit in AHS. Now, you've got a lot of other things to do and fires to put out before you think about something like this. But it just occurred to me, and we may discuss it with the two GovOps chairs and see if they have any interest.
Well,
It's a problem that's not being resolved.
Well, I think historically, Department of Labor had been so predominantly federally funded, nobody paid much attention to it because the budgetary connections were pretty minimal. Over time, that financing has changed and more general fund is coming in, and so I do think that it's by necessity, you really focus on where the state's putting its money as opposed to the feds. But Department of Labor does certainly, and we know that from the UI debacle, that department needs a lot more attention. So you can put that on your list too. We can put it on our list. Other questions for the auditor? Okay, well, thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon.
Can I just say one thing?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you for your work. It keeps us on our toes and we greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your time. And if you have any more questions about our budget, which I doubt, you know where to find me.
Yes, thank you, Doug. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, you too.
That is the end of our testimony. So I am going to adjourn the committee and go.